Last week we looked at Ronnie Krays' funeral. This week, let's have a look at Reggie's. Roll the credits. Hi guys, and welcome back to another edition of An English Undertaking. Last week we covered Ronnie Krays' funeral. Ronnie Kray, the once infamous, probably still infamous, UK gangster of the 1960s. Him and his brother Reggie ruled the East End of London in the 50s and 60s here in the UK, and both are now not with us. And last week we had a look in detail at Ronnie Krays' funeral. Ronnie died back in 1995. So this week we're going to have a look at his twin brother Reggie's funeral. Reggie died in 2001. So who was Reggie Cray? Reggie Cray was one half of the Kray twins, Ronnie and Reggie. Both ruled an underworld empire in the East End of London during the 1950s and 60s. In the last video, I covered quite a bit about Ronnie and Reggie and what they did and didn't get up to during that time. So I won't bore you to death again with the same information. But Reggie was Ronnie's twin, his identical twin. He again received a life sentence of 30 years by Lord Justice Melford Stevenson back in 1969 during their trial. That was for the murder of Jack the Hat McVitie. Jack the Hat was a fellow gangster. He was a Kray associate. I think he was actually a member of the firm, which was the name of the Kray twins gang at one point or another. But Jack was murdered by Reggie in a flat at a staged party in the East End of London. There are plenty of different reasons as to why Jack was murdered. You know, as you can imagine, something like that breeds all kinds of different theories and explanations, and he said, she said, he didn't, that kind of thing. But I think the overall consensus is that Jack the Hat was becoming a nuisance to the Kray twins. He was becoming a liability to both himself, because he was quite an unstable character, Jack the Hat. You know, he was reported to run into pubs in the East End of London, brandishing sawn-off shotguns and things like that. There's even a story of him throwing out his wife out of a moving car because she wouldn't share a bag of sweets with him, and that's not normal behaviour. So it was decided that Jack McVitie, or Jack the Hat, had to go. He was called Jack the Hat because obviously he always wore a hat. The reason for him wearing the hat, he was bald on top, and he was quite, you know, conscious of that. He was somewhat embarrassed by the fact that he was a bald man, so he wore the hat, and he just got the name Jack the Hat. Surname was McVitie. I don't think he's connected to the Biscuit dynasty, but I don't really know. So in 2001, after over 30 years in prison, Reggie Cray was finally released. Now, I just want to kind of dispel a couple of myths out there. The popular one is that all three Cray brothers died in prison. That's not true. Charlie Cray, Ronnie and Reggie's older brother, he died in prison, that's for sure. Ronnie Kray, he died in hospital, not prison. Now, he was still an inmate of Broadmoor Hospital, and Broadmoor is a psychiatric hospital for the criminally insane. And it's kind of halfway between a hospital and a prison. Hospital because the people in there have severe psychiatric disorders and they are being treated for such things. But of course, they can't just leave like you can in a normal hospital. You can't come and go as you please. So it's kind of halfway between a prison and a hospital. But he collapsed in Broadmoor, but actually died in a public hospital. So he didn't technically die in prison, although he was still in custody. I hope that makes sense. Reggie Cray was released from prison. He died a free man, but it was kind of a bittersweet victory, I suppose, if that's what you want to call it, for him, because he was only released because he was ill. So as I say, 6 weeks before his death, Reggie was released from prison on compassionate grounds by the then Home Secretary Jack Straw. He had terminal bladder cancer. He wasn't going to get better. He was quite clearly not a danger to the public, although I think if we're all completely honest with ourselves, Reggie Cray hadn't been a danger to the public for quite some time. I think the fact that he didn't really show any remorse for the crimes he was sent to prison for, that was probably what kept him in prison. Maybe if he'd have shown some remorse a little earlier on, maybe he'd have been freed earlier on. Nobody can ever possibly know now. So what's done is done. So with the fact that he was terminally ill with cancer and not given very long to live, he was released from prison, where he spent the remainder of his time, 6 weeks, in a hotel with his then wife, Roberta Kray. Roberta married Reggie in Parkhurst Prison during the mid-90s, I believe, and they were they were man and wife, and he died with her by his side. For those of you who know a bit about Reggie Cray anyway, you know that he was married in the 1960s to Frances Shea, who very sadly took her own life because she was embroiled in a world she had no knowledge of and didn't really want to be a part of. She didn't want to be a gangster's wife or a gangster's mole. She didn't want that life for her. She didn't want it for him, and she didn't want it for any children that they may have had. Incidentally, they didn't. So Frances kind of spiraled into a depression where she, was drinking a lot and taking a lot of prescription medication, and I think it all just got a bit too much for her. And one day she decided to end her life, and that sent Reggie into a spiral of, drink, drugs, depression. He really went downhill because he really, really loved Frances Shea. There's no doubt about that. Everybody who has anything to say about Reggie and Frances Cray will tell you that Reggie was absolutely head over heels, madly in love with her, and he worshipped her and doted on her. Unfortunately, she didn't really see that much of that side of Reggie. All she saw was Reggie Cray, the East End mobster, the gangster who was out all hours doing goodness knows what. And she sadly killed herself. And that's when trouble really started for Reggie, goaded by Ronnie Kray, his schizophrenic twin brother, to kind of kill, because by this time Ronnie had already killed George Cornell in the Blind Beggar pub. So he was kind of goading Reggie to do his, to, you know, get his button, as he put it, with reference to the mafia. Getting your button was like your first murder. So Reggie spent the last 6 weeks, like I said, in a hotel where he gave a number of interviews, as you can well imagine. Now that he was a free man, people were free to see him whenever, you know, they chose, or whenever he chose to see them. There was no restrictions. He could come and go as he pleased, although I don't think he really left that hotel room from the minute he got there. He was just too ill to really enjoy his freedom, which is, you know, a great shame. So a lot of people came to interview him, and he did I suppose you could call it a deathbed secrets. It was called The Krays, The Final Word. And it was a documentary about an hour long about the life and times of the Kray twins, with a full-on interview with Reggie Cray, setting the record straight over a lot of things. And you actually see him, you know, on his deathbed giving this interview, and to see him in the bed not well is quite a sad and pitiful sight. You know, you look at Reggie back in the 1960s to the pictures that you were seeing on the screen during this interview. It was sad, and I think it was sad because, you know, it was just a wasted life, really. Okay, yeah, he may have had a good time when he was out and about doing his gangstering, but, you know, he spent the good proportion of his life in prison. I mean, the two of them were only 34, 35 when they went to prison. So, you know, 30 years in jail, you know, that's a massive chunk out of your life when you're only in your mid-30s. So it was a real shame. He only lasted 6 weeks, and he died peacefully in his bed, surrounded by obviously his wife Roberta, and a couple of close friends. I think Frankie Fraser may have been one of the people to see him pass on. But yeah, so 6 weeks and he was gone. So it then turned to what we're gonna do with regards to the funeral. And given the fact that Ronnie's was so huge, there was no question that Reggie's was gonna be on a similar scale. And it was. So W.E. English and Son, the funeral directors who buried Ronnie, were called upon to do the same to Reggie. Now, as far as I'm aware, no death threats were made to the funeral home, and no one was asked to spend the night in the chapel of rest with Reggie Krays' body to make sure that it wasn't, you know, stolen or, you know, harmed in any way. So I think as far as that is concerned, it was a fairly normal, straightforward funeral. There was no private security from Dave Courtney. Whether he went or not, I don't know. I would imagine he went. I'd have to check that one out, actually. But he definitely didn't do the security. Don't know who did it. Obviously, it would have been a combination of the Metropolitan Police and whatever security firm was employed at the time. I think after Ronnie Krays' funeral, Dave Courtney was put on a pedestal as like the new up and coming kind of, London gangster, which, as far as he was concerned, was far from the truth. So the police kind of clamped down on Dave Courtney and his business interests straight away. So I don't think he could have done the security even if he was asked to. So as far as the funeral itself went, it was pretty much the same as Ronnie's. Reggie travelled in a horse-drawn hearse from the funeral parlour. It went along the same route as Ronnie's, passed along the same horn. So Valence Road, where the twins once lived with their mother Violet, to the church where a service was held. Again, similar to Ron's, I think as well, he had the same songs as Ronnie. Ronnie had My Way by Frank Sinatra played in the church. Reggie, I believe, had the same. And then he was laid to rest in the same grave as his twin brother, next to his other brother Charlie, who passed a couple of years before, and their mother Violet. I don't know whether Charlie Craig Sr. is buried in the same grave or not. He may be. But if that's the case, the entire Cray family are in this one part of the grave, like a family plot. Frances Shay, or Frances Cray as she was known, I think is buried in the same cemetery, I think. So yeah, literally the entire Cray family is now reunited in death. The funeral was televised. I remember it being televised. But there wasn't the hype and the drama of Ronnie's back in '95. And that's purely because I think, since then we'd moved on in the UK from like trying to not to kind of glamorize crime. And quite rightly so, crime is not glamorous. It shouldn't be glamorized. It doesn't pay, it really doesn't. It might pay for the minute that you're doing it, but in the long run, it doesn't, because you either die in prison or you die in the street, or you spend a good portion of your life in prison, get a horrendous illness, and only get let out because somebody feels sorry for you. I mean, what kind of life is that? It's no life at all. So that was Reggie Krays' funeral. It pretty much, like I said, mirrored that of Ronnie's. The crowds still lined the street to say goodbye. The floral tribute still came in abundance. There was still a large police and security presence. But, the two of them now, both Ronnie and Reggie, are reunited in the grave, which is not how they would have wanted it, but that just goes to show that crime really does not pay. So if you're thinking about it, don't do it. Get a proper job. It might be crap, your boss might be an arsehole, but at least you're not going to be shot in the street or thrown in a jail cell for the rest of your life. So just think on. So that concludes this week's video. Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, a like and a share. If you like this channel and you want to see more of the content, don't forget to subscribe. Turn on the bell notifications as well to be notified when new content is posted. I do try and post one a week, which so far it has been okay, but trust me, there'll come a time where it won't happen for a couple of weeks for whatever reason. But for now, I'm trying to do one a week. If you'd like me to discuss anything in particular regarding the history of funerals or death care or anything like that in the UK, then just either drop me a message, leave a comment in the section below, and I will get back to you. I do read all the comments and I do reply to them, so thank you very much. Keep them coming in. Lockdown legs, I hope you got the job. That was on Tuesday, I believe, so I hope it all went well. Drop me a message and let me know how it got on. If it didn't go as well as you like, don't be too disheartened. Please don't give up. Keep on trying, because eventually you will get in. But if you did, fair play, welcome to the family, as they say. But for now, thanks very much for tuning in. Don't forget to check me out on all my social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, I'm there. Just go and look me up. I post a lot more on there than I do on here, so give me a follow, and I always try and do and follow back as well. So yeah, see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.